Hello students, welcome to KENE'S Educare, a group of KENE solutions. This is part 3 of lesson number 6, tissues. Okay, so in the last part we have in this lesson tissues, we are studying about the plant tissue and the animal tissue, right? So plant tissue we have almost covered it, like we are just left with the complex permanent tissue and then we will be done with the plant tissue, right? So, when we started with this lesson, I gave you a brief introduction on different types of tissues which are present in plants, which are present in animals. I have told you all to make a note of it for a revision purpose, right? So, last class में we saw that plant tissue जो है, that is like of two kinds. We have meristematic tissue and we have permanent tissue, and permanent tissue is again of two type. We have simple permanent tissue and we have complex permanent tissue. And meristematic tissue, based on the location where they exist, meristematic tissue is again of three type. We have apical meristematic tissue, we have you can say we have lateral, right, lateral meristematic tissue, and we have intercalary meristematic tissue which exists. So these are the three types of plant tissue that is meristematic tissue के types है, and meristematic tissue itself is a plant tissue that we have, right? After that we have to study in this lesson is about the animal tissue. अब animal tissue जो है, that is further of four types. Okay, we have epithelial tissue, we have connective tissue, we have muscular tissue, and we have nervous tissue to discuss. And after that we have the exercise questions, like we have 14 questions to discuss. So in this part, okay, part 3, we are going to complete with all the different types of animal tissues which are present. Okay, and in the next part, part 4, if possible, I'll complete that question and answer part in this lesson, in this part itself, or else I am going to continue that in the part 4. Okay, so I hope that whatever we have discussed on the plant tissue, that is being clear to you, and the basic concept which I have told you all to remember, that is अभी हमारा जो human body है, that is made up of cells. ठीक है, when a group of cells come together, now this group of cells should have similar structure as well as similar function to perform. Okay, so when this group of cells they come together, they make up the tissue. And when a group of tissue come together, and now this tissue should have the structural and functional similarities. Okay, so when this group of tissues come together, they make up our organs. We know we have different organs in our body, right? So how is our organ made? When a group of tissue is coming together, that is making up our organ. And when 2-3 organs they are coordinating with each other and they are performing certain kind of function in our body, then we call it as organ system. क्या बोलेंगे हम उसको? Organ system. And once we have this organ system which exists in our body, it means a multicellular organism has been formed, a human being has been formed. Okay, so I hope that this basic you can say level of organization has been clear to you. What is level of organization now? What I have told you, group of cells they are going to make up the tissue, group of tissues they are going to make the organ, group of organ they makes the organ system, and this is how a multicellular organism is made. So this is a level of organization which I have written it and I have given you in part 1 as well as part 2, because this is the basic thing जो आपको आपके बॉडी के बारे में पता होनी चाहिए, right? So I have already discussed on that. Now how did we started this lesson is, we started by defining the tissue only. So what is tissue? A tissue is a group of cell having similar structure and function. क्या है tissue? Tissue is a group of cell so having similar structure and function. And when it comes to plants and animal group of cells, we call them tissue. A group of cell which is present in plant is called as plant tissue. A group of cell which is present in animal is called as animal tissue. Now all the plant and animal tissue are the cells that we have, they all perform specific function in our body. क्या करते हैं वो? They perform certain specific function in our body. For example, in human beings, the cell of muscular tissue, जो muscular, अब हमारे body में जो muscular tissue है, how our body is able to move, how there is a movement that is occurring in our body, so that is because of the muscular tissue which is present in us. So the cells of this muscular tissue, they are contracting and they are relaxing, and because of this contraction and relaxation, our body is able to move, and we can see that there is a movement in our body. Okay, now this is all with respect to human being. Now when it comes to plant cell, ठीक है, प्लांट्स के पास सेल है, सो प्लांट्स के अंदर जो सेल है, किसके सेल्स? वेस्क्यूलर टिश्यू के सेल. नाउ आई हैव ऑलरेडी इंट्रोड्यूस यू ऑल विद दिस वेस्क्यूलर टिश्यू, दैट इज द xylem and phloem, not phylum, phloem, xylem and phloem. So xylem is responsible for conducting the water to the various parts of the plants, and phloem is responsible for conducting the food system in the plants, that is from one part of the plant to the other part of the plant. Okay. After that we saw that what like there might be a question in your mind ki, is the plant cell made up of the same tissue and the animal cell is also made up of the same tissue, right? So if you can see the structure here of between the plant and the animal tissue, you can see that there are some noticeable differences which can be seen between both, in with respect to the plant tissue as well as with respect to the animal tissue. Now plant tissue ka, if I tell you, the plants, they are always stationary or fixed. Have you seen plant moving from one place to another like we human beings and like animals are moving? No, right? So plants jo hai, they are always stationary, they are fixed at one place, they don't move, right? And since they have to be upright, kya? Since this plant tissue has to be upright, or this plants have to be in upright position, they have large quantity of supportive tissue. क्या है plants के पास? Plants, because they have to be in upright position all the time, their position is fixed. Okay, so they have certain kind of supportive tissue, large quantity of supportive tissue which has been present, and this supportive tissue generally has dead cell. क्या है supportive tissue में? It generally has dead cells. And when it comes to animals, animals जो है, as I told you that plants do not move from one place to another, but animals on the other hand, they move from one place to another. Animals को हम देखते रहते हैं that they are locomoting from here there. Dogs का example ले लो. अगर if I go to wild animals like tiger and animal, they also don't sit at one place, right? They also move from one place to another. So why do they move from one place to another? In search of food, mates and shelter. Okay, so who is going to require more energy? Animal cell, animal tissue or the plant tissue? किसको ज़्यादा energy की ज़रूरत होगी? So here animal is going to require more amount of energy because it is going to locomote, because it is going to move from one place to another for in the search of food, mates and shelters. So animals are going to consume more energy as compared to plants. Okay, and most of the tissues these animals are having, they are living. What are they? Living होंगे वो. Okay. सी अनदर डिफरेंस, एक डिफरेंस हमने देखा कि प्लांट स्टेशनरी रहते हैं, दे आर ऑलवेज फिक्स्ड एट द पोजीशन, but animals are moving, they are locomoting, so they need more amount of energy. This is one of the difference that we saw. Now another difference that exists between plant and animal is the pattern of growth. What pattern do they follow when they are growing? Okay, so the growth in plant is limited to certain region, while this is not so in animals. Now if you see, if an animal is growing, the hands, the legs, the face, everything grows together, right? So it is not limited to a certain region that the only the legs are going to grow. Animals में ऐसा नहीं है ना, ऐसा नहीं है. हम human beings में भी ऐसा नहीं है that when we are growing, only our legs and our hands are growing and the rest part is remaining the same. It is not so, right? All the parts of our body is growing when we are growing. But this is not the case in plants, because plants के अंदर the growth is limited to certain region. Okay, what happens in plant? In plants, the growth is limited to certain region only, and there are some tissues in plant. Now see, they are limited to certain region, but now there are some tissues in plant जो localized होते हैं एक certain region में. What are they? They are localized in a certain region. Okay, so based on the dividing capacity of the tissue, अभी tissue के पास जो dividing capacity है, based on that, the various plant tissue we can define or we can classify it as growing or meristematic tissue and permanent tissue. As I told you that हमारा जो tissue है based on the dividing capacity of the tissue, plants जो है they are of two type. We have plant tissues are of two type, meristematic tissue and permanent tissue. Okay, so यहाँ पे क्या बोला गया है that cell growth in animal is more uniform. Okay, whatever kind of cell growth occurs in animal, that is more uniform as we see it with respect to plant cell. And with respect to this animal tissue, there is no demarcation of dividing and non-dividing regions in animal. ओके तो अगर हम एनिमल टिश्यूज की बात करें, जो एनिमल के सेल्स होते हैं, बिकॉज दे आर ग्रोइंग यूनिफॉर्मली, वहाँ पे कोई डिवाइडिंग या नॉन डिवाइडिंग रीजन्स नहीं होता. देर इज नो सच डिमार्केशंस विच एग्जिस्ट इन एनिमल्स. ओके, सो द स्ट्रक्चरल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन of organs and organ system is far more specialized and localized in complex animals than even in very complex plants. तो if you compare between plants and animals, तो plants के पास भी इतने ज़्यादा specialized organs नहीं होते, but when it comes to animals, complex animals, उनके पास for performing their daily activities, for performing different functions, for having a structural organizations of organs and the organ system, they have some specialized and localized organs which are present within them so that their functions can be carried out significantly. Okay, so this fundamental difference that we see between the plant tissue and the animal tissue, this difference is reflecting the different modes of life which is being pursued by the two major groups of animal, particularly in their different feeding methods. Now, the fundamental differences that we saw with respect to the tissue that the plants are having, the animals are having, right? With respect to specialized organ, we saw the difference between plants and animals. So, all these things you can say that this fundamental difference between plant and the animal tissue, it deflects as some modes of life which is being pursued by this animal group of, like plant group of organisms as well as animals. Okay, so particularly this differ in their different feeding methods. Also you will see that plant tissue as well as animals, like plant and animals, they both have differently adapted for a sedentary existence on one hand. Like plants have a sedentary existence where the plants are not moving from one place to another, while animals के case में we see that they show active locomotion. Now, why do animals move from one place to another? In search of food, in search of shelter, and in search of their mates. So animals are moving, whereas the plants, they are like they show a sedentary existence. They are not moving, they are fixed at one place only. So this is how they are contributing to the difference that exists in the organ system design. Okay, so with reference to this complex animal and the plant bodies, whatever complex like specialized organs the animals are having, the specialized tissues the plants are having, with respect to this complex animal and plant bodies, we are now going to talk about the concept of tissues in detail. That is, we are going to discuss on the plant tissue and the animal tissue in detail. Now we are aware of that plant tissues जो है, they are of two type. We have meristematic tissue and we have permanent tissue. And this meristematic tissue is further again divided into apical meristematic tissue, then we have intercalary meristematic tissue, and lastly we have this lateral meristematic tissue. Now apical meristematic tissue, it lies at the tip of the you can say tip of the root hair, and then intercalary meristematic tissue, it is at the base of the it is present at the base, and the lateral meristematic tissue is, it occupies the lateral position in the plant. So this is the location of the meristematic tissue which is shown in the plant body. Okay, So plant का growth, as I told you, that animals का growth जो है, that doesn't occur in specific regions only, right? If an animal is growing, the growth can be seen in all the parts of the body, but this is not the case with plant. Because plants में you will see that only the specific region of the plant is growing. And why does this happen? Why only the certain specific region of the plant grows? Because there is a dividing tissue which is present in plant, and that dividing tissue, we call it as meristematic tissue. What do we call that dividing tissue as? Meristematic tissue. And this meristematic tissue is located only at this point where the growth occurs. Okay, so now depending upon the region where this meristematic tissues are present, we can classify them into three types. So how we are classifying this meristematic tissue into three types? Based on the region where they are present. So we have apical meristematic tissue, we have lateral meristematic tissue, and we have intercalary meristematic tissue. Okay, now all these tissues, they are going to produce new cells. So whatever kind of new cells are produced by the meristem, you will see that they will be like meristem itself. मतलब अगर meristematic tissue like meristem से नया cells develop हो रहा है, so you will see that new cell is going to be like the meristem itself. But as you see, when they are growing and when they are maturing, what happens, जैसे जैसे उनमें growth हो रही है, जैसे जैसे वो mature करेंगे, their characteristics are slowly going to change, and you will see that they become differentiated as the component of the other tissue. Okay, जैसे कि now if you see जो newborn baby होता है, that looks similar to mama or papa somehow, some or the other how, right? But as the newborn baby is growing, it is maturing, what happens, उसका characteristics change होता है. You see that the face is changing, everything is changing, right? So the characteristics are slowly going to change, and they are going to differentiate themselves as the component of the other tissue. Okay, so whatever cells we have of this meristematic tissue, they are very active. Okay, what are they? They are very active. They have dense cytoplasm, they have a thin cellulose wall and a prominent nuclei. What do the cells of the meristematic tissue have? See, all the cells of the meristematic tissue, they are going to be very much active. Now since they are active, unka cytoplasm is going to be dense, and since it is active, it means it is performing its function efficiently, right? So they are going to have a dense cytoplasm, a thin cellulose wall, as well as they are going to have a prominent nuclei which is being present. Okay, but dense cytoplasm है, thin cellulose wall है, nuclei भी है, but they are not going to have a vacuole which will be present. Okay, now can we think why they will lack vacuole? What do you think? Vacuoles क्यों नहीं है यहाँ पे? Now for this, I want you all to go back to lesson number 5, that is fundamental unit of life, and study on that. Okay, and study on that why this meristematic tissue is not having a vacuole. Okay, then we discussed on this activity where I told you all to do this activity at your house because it is possible to do, right? अब आपको क्या करना है? You have to take 2 glass jars, उसके अंदर 2 onion डालना है, onion bulb, like you can see in the picture, right? So you have to put 2 onion bulbs inside each jar, and then you have to allow that onion bulb to grow. Okay, and आप उसका growth notice record करोगे, like the observation table which has been given. दोनों जार का जो लेंथ होगा, ये जो अनियन बल्ब का, हाउ मच इट इज ग्रोइंग, यू हैव टू रिकॉर्ड दैट फ्रॉम डे 1 इटसेल्फ. ओके, तो आप डे 1, डे 2, डे 3 पे आपने उसका लेंथ रिकॉर्ड किया. ऑन डे 4 व्हाट यू हैव टू डू, जो आपका जार 2 है उसका आप अनियन बल्ब कट करोगे 1 सेंटीमीटर तक, एंड यू हैव टू ऑब्जर्व द ग्रोथ नाउ फॉर द डे 4 and day 5. And you know what are you going to see? See, I have told you all to do this, and what will be the conclusion that you can make from here, I'll tell you directly. What happens here is, जब आप जार 2 का 1 सेंटीमीटर लेंथ कट करते हो, ठीक है, रूट टिप कट करते हो अनियन बल्ब का, you will see that वो ग्रोथ नहीं होती बाद में. The jar 2 का onion bulb or the root tip is not going to grow later. Why is it so? वो grow क्यों नहीं करेगा? Because you have cutted the apical meristem of the root tip, or you can say of the onion bulb, and once you have cutted the apical meristem, that is the tip from where the growth occurs, because apical meristem जो है that is responsible for the for increasing the length of the root hair, you can say. Okay, so यहाँ पे because you have cutted the apical meristem, it is not going to show any growth. And when you compare it with jar 1 is going to show the growth because apical meristem is present in that jar 1. Okay, so this was all about the meristematic tissue. Do remember the three types of meristematic tissue based on the location. We have apical meristematic tissue, we have intercalary meristematic tissue, and lastly we have you can say lateral meristematic tissue. Okay, now the next type of tissue that comes under this is permanent tissue. Now what happens to the cell once it is being formed by the meristematic tissue? अब meristematic tissues जब बन जाते हैं, ठीक है, तो उनसे जो सेल्स बनते हैं, व्हाट विल हैपन टू दोज सेल्स? सो हियर दे टेक अप अ स्पेसिफिक रोल एंड दे आर गोइंग टू लूज देयर एबिलिटी टू डिवाइड. क्या होगा? What is going to happen? The cells are going to take their specific role, whatever role is to be performed by the cell. They're going to perform that and they're going to lose their ability to divide, and as a result the cells of this meristematic tissue, they form a permanent tissue. What are they going to form? Since they are losing their ability to divide, they are not dividing again, so they are going to form a permanent tissue here. And this process of taking up a permanent shape, size and function, okay, now what is happening? Permanent tissue ban gaya hai. So the process where it is taking up a permanent shape, permanent size and a permanent function, we call this process as differentiation. ठीक है, क्या बोलता है? Differentiation. Now once we have this differentiation, it leads to development of various types of permanent tissue. What does this differentiation leads to? Differentiation leads to development of various types of permanent tissue we are going to get formed here. So we have simple permanent tissue and we have complex permanent tissue. Okay, but before that we saw this activity where we saw कि हमें एक plant stem लेना है. We have to cut the thin slices of those plant stem. Okay, now after cutting that plant stem, हम लोग क्या करेंगे? We have to keep that into like you have to stain that with saffranin. क्या करोगे आप? वो plant stem को stain करोगे saffranin से. Okay, and place one neatly cut section on a slide, and अब slide पे डालोगे आप saffranin से stain करने के बाद, and you have to add a drop of glycerin onto it. Okay, now you already know how it is to be done, right? आपको पता है कि कैसे करना है, because I have already shown you about uh, how all the procedures are carried out when we were discussing lesson number 5, that is fundamental unit of life, right? So हमने वहाँ पे देखा है, after adding this staining solution that is saffranin, आपको उस पर glycerin डालना है, drop of glycerin, then you have to put the cover slip and you have to observe it under a compound microscope. Now you have to see, while you are observing, you have to check out various types of cells and what kind of arrangements they are showing there. Okay, and you need to compare the cells that you see under the microscope with this section of the stems which have been given here. Okay, so you'll see that you have this epidermis, collenchyma, parenchyma, xylem, phloem, vascular bundles which have been present in the cell. Okay, so you will find all these things, and all the cells, they are different. Okay, and you can see, like you can see this collenchyma, you can see parenchyma, even you can see sclerenchyma. Sclerenchyma का you have two structures which we have discussed. एक structure था lateral section and दूसरा वाला था transverse section and longitudinal section. Okay, so these are the two types of you can say sclerenchyma. तो हमें एक simple permanent tissue है and we have complex permanent tissue. Okay, so simple permanent tissue and complex permanent tissue, let's see what exactly it is. So हमारा जो epidermis है, उसके just नीचे you will see that there are few layers of cell which are present, and those layer of cells, they are generally called as simple permanent tissue. ठीक है, so parenchyma जो है, we have three different types of simple permanent tissue. We have parenchyma, we have collenchyma, and we have sclerenchyma. So these are the three important types of simple permanent tissue that we have. So parenchyma is the most common simple permanent tissue. What? Parenchyma जो है, that is the most common simple permanent tissue. And this parenchyma, it consists of relatively unspecialized cell. क्या होता है? parenchyma के पास unspecialized cell होता है, but the cell wall that they have is very thin. So can you see this first structure? This is the diagram of parenchyma, where you have to show this intracellular spaces which are present between the cell. Okay, so these are living cell. parenchyma जो है, they are living cells and they are usually loosely arranged. कैसे होते हैं ये? loosely arranged होंगे, and that is why you will see that there are large spaces which are present between the cells, and we call the spaces between the cell as intracellular spaces. Okay, अब इनका function क्या है parenchyma का? This parenchyma tissue is generally going to store food. क्या करेंगे ये? They are going to store food. Okay, so just look at the structure of parenchyma. How does it looks like? After that, the second structure which you can see, that is the collenchyma, and if you can see, the walls of the collenchyma are thick. It has a nucleus inside it, it has a vacuole, and it has a cell wall as well. Now you are aware of what is nucleus, what is cell wall, and what a vacuole is. We have already discussed on all this in last lesson, right? And if you can see, there is no intracellular spaces which are existing between this collenchyma का structure, right? So in some situations you will see, अगर parenchyma के पास अगर chlorophyll है, chlorophyll है, okay, what did I said? In some situations, अगर parenchyma के पास chlorophyll है and if it is performing photosynthesis, then we call that as chlorenchyma. क्या बोलेंगे हम उसको? We are going to call that as chlorenchyma. And in aquatic plants, there are large air cavities which are present in parenchyma that is going to help them to float. तो parenchyma के अंदर, if there are large air cavities which are present, then it is going to help the parenchyma in floating, and such a type of parenchyma we call it as erenchyma. तो अगर parenchyma के पास chlorophyll है, we call that parenchyma as chlorenchyma. And if the plants are having large air cavities, then we call that as what? We call them as erenchyma. Okay, so we have chlorenchyma and we have erenchyma. Now whatever kind of flexibility which is present in plant, that is because of another permanent tissue. Flexibility क्यों होती है plants के अंदर? That is because of this collenchyma tissue. Okay, so collenchyma की वजह से what happens is, the plants are able to bend the various parts of the plants. Like, you know, the plants have tendrils, the stems of the climbers, without breaking. How are they able to bend themselves? This is all possible because of the collenchyma. Okay, so collenchyma, it also provides mechanical strength or mechanical support to the plants. Okay, so we can find this tissue in the leaf stalks which are present below the epidermis. तो हमें collenchyma कहाँ पे मिलेगा? You will find this collenchyma below the epidermis in the leaf stalks, and you can say that this collenchyma, the cells of these tissues, they are living, elongated, and they are irregularly thickened at the corner. collenchyma के cells कैसे होते हैं? collenchyma के cells are living cells, they are elongated, and you will see that they are going to have an irregular thickening at the corner which are present, and there is a very little intracellular spaces. Almost कुछ भी intracellular space नहीं है, बहुत कम intracellular space exist करता है between this collenchyma. Okay, and then after collenchyma, the another kind of permanent tissue that we have is sclerenchyma. Now what makes the tissue or the plant hard and stiff? So the plants become hard and stiff, that is because of this sclerenchyma which is present. Like you can see the coconut, the outer part of the coconut, that is the husk of the coconut, is so hard. Why? Because it is made up of sclerenchymatous tissue. Okay, and remember one thing, ये जो sclerenchymatous tissue के जो cells होते हैं, they all are dead. Okay, so you will see this sclerenchyma, they are long and narrow, as well as their walls, they will be thick due to the lignin which has been present, and they are so thick that the walls are so thick that you will see there are no internal spaces which are present inside the cell. Okay, so this tissue which we see, it is present in stem, it is present around the vascular bundle, in the veins of the leaves, and in the hard covering of the seeds and nuts as well. Okay, So this clarenchyma is going to provide strength to the plant part. Okay, so this is how this clarenchyma looks like. The first structure is the, you can say, this is the transport section of this clarenchyma, and second one is the longitudinal section of this clarenchyma. Okay, now this third activity also we have discussed, which was regarding this freshly plucked leaf of royo. We have to stretch that leaf and you have to break it by applying the pressure. क्या करना है हमें, ये रोयो का leaf stretch करना है, and after stretching it we have to break that by applying pressure. So while breaking it हमें उसको stretched ही रखना है. We have to keep it stretched so that उसका जो pill है और या उसका जो skin है, that should project out from the cut. Okay, now we need to remove this peel and we need to put that into the petri dish, and we have to fill that petri dish with the water. After putting this like peel into the petri dish, हम उसके अंदर क्या करेंगे, petri dish के अंदर ही हम saffronin डालेंगे. Now saffronin is going to stain, क्या करेगा saffronin, it stains the leaf of royo. Now we have to wait for a couple of minutes and then transfer it onto a slide. After that we need to gently place a cover slip over it. Now we all know that cover slip is essential, and after putting that cover slip we have to observe it under a microscope. Okay, now see, this is the guard cell and the epidermal cells which have been shown here, and the first picture is showing us the lateral view of the guard cell and the epidermal cell, and the second structure is showing us the you can say this is the surface view of the guard cell and the epidermal cell. Okay, so what you observe is the outermost layer of the cell, and outermost layer of the cell we call it as epidermis. Okay, now ये जो epidermis है ना, that is usually made up of single layer of cell. Epidermis किससे बनता है, एक single layer of cell से बनता है, and in some plants which are living in dry habitat, कौन से, some plants जो dry habitats में रहते हैं उनका epidermis it is going to be thicker. Okay, because protection against the water loss is critical. Okay, तो कुछ कुछ प्लांट्स में जो ड्राई हैबिटेट्स में रहते हैं उनका एपिडर्मिस कैसा होता है, व्हाट इज एपिडर्मिस, outermost layer of the skin is the epidermis, right? So the plants who are living in dry habitat उनका epidermis are going to be thicker because वहाँ पे protection against the water loss is very much critical. Okay, so the entire surface of the plant has an outer covering which we call it as epidermis. तो जो पूरा entire surface होता है plant का, उसके पास एक outer covering होती है called as epidermis, and it is this outer covering is going to protect all the parts of the plants. So epidermal cells on the aerial part of the plant, you will see that they secrete a waxy water resistant layer on the outer surface. एपिडर्मल सेल्स क्या सिक्रीट करेंगे, एक वैक्सी एंड वाटर रेजिस्टेंट लेयर सिक्रीट करेंगे आउटर सरफेस पे, एंड दिस इज गोइंग टू एड इन प्रोटेक्शन अगेंस्ट लॉस ऑफ वाटर, then mechanical injury and invasion by the parasitic fungi. ठीक है, what happens is ये epidermal cells क्या करेंगे, they are going to secrete a waxy water resistant layer on this outer surface which is going to aid in protection against the loss of water, because there shouldn't be like ज़्यादा loss of water भी नहीं होना चाहिए. Loss of water from the plant is called as transpiration. I hope you are aware of this transpiration process, right? So this is going to protect against the loss of water, mechanical injury, as well as invasion by the parasitic fungi. And because it is having a protective roles, because it is protecting from all this, and since we can say that this cells they have the protective roles to play, so the cells of the epidermal tissue they are going to form a continuous layer, and this continuous layer is going to be present without the intracellular spaces. ये continuous layer कैसे present होंगे, बिना किसी intracellular space के present होंगे. Okay, so most epidermal cells they are, you will see that they are relatively flat only, and often the outer as well as the side walls they are going to be thicker than the inner wall. तो inner wall से ज़्यादा thick कौन होता है, जो outer wall hota hai, they are mostly thicker than the inner wall, and you can see there are small spores which are present in the epidermis of the leaves. Can you see there are small pores which are present? So this pores ko we call them as stomata. Kya bolenge aap? Stomata. If you can see this stomata, they are enclosed by two kidney shaped cell, and we call this kidney shaped cell as the guard cell. Okay, so this guard cell, they are necessary for exchanging the gases with the atmosphere. You know now that plants, they exchange the gas, they take in carbon dioxide and they give us oxygen. So for exchanging that gases with the atmosphere, guard cells plays a very important role. Okay, and as I told you about the transpiration, what is transpiration? Loss of water in the form of water vapor. It takes place through the stomata. Can you see the stoma and the guard cells which have been labeled? तो स्टोमाटा के थ्रू क्या होता है? There is loss of water which takes place in the form of water vapor through the stomata, and this process we call it as transpiration process. Okay, after that, if you can see this is the protective tissue, okay, which have this cork cells, and if you can see ये cell कितना ज़्यादा congested है, right? तो इसको हम क्या बोलते हैं? You will say that they are compactly arranged cell. कैसे cells है ये? They are compactly arranged without any intracellular spaces which is present, right? So the epidermal cells of the roots that we have, अब epidermal cells of roots का function क्या होगा? First of all, water absorb करना, okay? So they are commonly going to bear long hair-like parts. Now this long hair-like parts, they are going to increase the total absorptive surface area. What are they going to do? They are going to increase the total absorptive surface area. And in some plants we can say, like अगर desert plant है like cactus and all, तो उनके epidermis पे they are going to have a thick waxy coating of cutin. क्या present होगा? There will be a thick waxy coating of cutin which will be present. Now cutin जो है, that is a chemical substance which is having this waterproof quality. Cutin के पास क्या है? Cutin is a chemical substance with waterproof quality which is present on its outer surface. Now what do you think, what is the reason for this? Because it is a desert plant, and waterproof quality होनी चाहिए desert plants में, right? So that is the reason this cutin has been present there. And is the outer layer of the branch of tree, what do you think कि जो tree का outer layer होता है, that is different from the outer layer of the young stem? What do you think on this? So see, as the plants they are growing older, जैसे जैसे plants जो है they grow, उनका जो outer protective tissue होता है ना, उनमें कुछ changes देखने मिलते हैं. Like we can see that there is a strip of secondary meristem which is located in the cortex, and this form layer of cell which constitute the cork. Now cork is present in the bark region of the tree. Okay, so when you see that the cells of this corks, they are almost dead, and you will see, can you see the cells of the cork? They are dead cells, and you can see that they are compactly arranged without any intracellular spaces. Okay, so along with this cork, like along with this cutin, they also have a substance which we call it as suberin. What do we call it as? Suberin, and this suberin is present in the wall that makes them impervious to gases and water. Okay, suberin क्या करता है? Suberin makes the wall of the plants impervious to gases as well as water. Okay, now the next type of permanent tissue, after simple permanent tissue, we have this complex permanent tissue. Now if you can see complex permanent tissue में, it includes xylem and phloem, and xylem has tracheids, vessels, and xylem parenchyma, and this is the section of phloem. So phloem have sieve plate, sieve tube, phloem parenchyma, and companion cell. So whenever you are writing on complex permanent tissue, that is whenever you are writing on xylem and phloem, you need to draw both the diagrams because it is very much important. Okay, so the different types of tissues we have discussed until now, they are made up of only one type of cell, because वो simple थे, सारे simple tissues थे, तो वो सिर्फ एक type के cell से बनते हैं, that is they look like each other. Okay, but now we are discussing on complex permanent tissue, right? So here, because it is complex tissue, यहाँ पे you will see that there are more than one types of cells which are coming together, and they do not look like each other. Okay, so see, when we are having only one type of cell which are looking like each other, we call such tissue as simple permanent tissue. क्या बोलेंगे हम इनको? Simple permanent tissue. Yet another type of permanent tissue is complex tissue. अभी जो other type का permanent tissue जो हमारे पास होता है, we call that as complex tissue. Okay. अब ये complex tissue किससे बनता है? This complex tissue, it is made up of more than one type of cell. किससे बनता है? More than one type of cell से, and that is why we call it as complex tissue. Okay. So all these cells, they coordinate with each other so that they can perform a common function. ये cells क्या करेंगे? एक दूसरे के साथ coordinate करते हैं ताकि वो एक कॉमन फंक्शन परफॉर्म कर सके. लाइक द कॉम्प्लेक्स टिश्यू का एग्जाम्पल दैट वी हैव इज xylem and phloem. Now I have already told you that xylem conducts water to different parts of the plant and phloem conducts food to different plant parts of the plant. So they are called as vascular tissues also, vascular tissues of the plant, right? So xylem and phloem, they both are conducting tissues and they constitute a vascular bundle. And vascular tissue, one that has made possible the survival in the terrestrial environment. Now vascular tissues are the one जिन्होंने xylem and phloem का survival जो है, it has made it possible that the xylem and phloem, they can survive, or this vascular tissues, they can survive in the terrestrial environment as well. Okay, so in figure 6.3, showing a section of stem, you can see the different types of cells which are present in the vascular bundle, right? So when we were discussing on this figure, you can see that there are different types of tissues which you can see. And यहाँ पे आप देख सकते हो कि plant के stem के यहाँ पे where is the xylem which is present and where is the phloem which has been present, right? So xylem and phloem here, then we have this vascular bundle which has been present. We have epidermis, we have collenchyma, we have parenchyma, and this is the topmost part, which is called as the cuticle, which has been present. So I want you all to draw this section of the stem in your notebook 2 times and be thorough with all the diagrams which have been given. Okay, practice all the diagram, because whenever you're writing an answer on that, आपको वहाँ पे diagram draw करना is very important. Okay, so vascular tissues के वजह से क्या हुआ है, it is possible for the plants to survive in the terrestrial environment as well. Okay, so as I showed you the structure of the section of stem, you can see that there are different types of cells like xylem, phloem, vascular bundle, collenchyma, then we have parenchyma, which are simple permanent tissues which were present, right? So when it comes to xylem, you should know that xylem includes tracheids. This is how the tracheids look like. It has peats into it. This is the vessel, xylem vessel, and third, it has xylem parenchyma which has been present. Okay, and when it comes to phloem, this is the section of the phloem which has been given, and it includes the sieve plate, it has sieve tube, it has phloem parenchyma, and lastly it has this companion cell which are present in the section of the phloem and xylem. These are the type of complex tissues that we have. Okay, so see what has been given here. Xylem consists of tracheids, vessels and xylem parenchyma as well as xylem fibers. So xylem के पास क्या क्या है? It has vessels, it has tracheids, it has vessels, it has xylem parenchyma as well as xylem fibers all together. Okay, so the tracheids and the xylem vessels, they are going to have thick wall, and they are going to have many like from this thick wall, many are going to be the dead cells when they mature. So when the cells are maturing, what happens? They are dead. Okay, so tracheids and vessels, they are tubular structure. Can you see the tracheids and vessels, right? So can you see tracheids and tubulars, what kind of structure both of them are having? They're having a tubular structure, and because of this tubular structure, it allows them to transport the water and mineral vertically. Now water and mineral should be transported vertically, and who is making it possible? It is being possible because of the tubular structure which the tracheids and the vessels have. Okay, so as I told you, xylem कहाँ पे involved होता है? Xylem is involved in conducting water from one part of the plant to the other plant, whereas the phloem, it is you can say is responsible for conducting the food from one part of the plant to the other, right? So the parenchyma that we have now, parenchyma we have discussed while discussing the simple permanent tissue, right? So parenchyma is going to store the food. Xylem fibers which are present, the xylem fibers, they are mainly supportive in function. क्या है xylem fibers? They are supportive in function, so they are going to support the plant. And phloem, if I talk about, then this phloem, it is made up of 5 types of cell. कितने टाइप्स ऑफ सेल से बनता है फ्लोएम? 5 टाइप्स. सो सी, वी हैव सीव प्लेट, we have sieve tube, we have phloem parenchyma, and we have a companion cell, as well as we have phloem fibers together. So this is how the phloem is made up of 5 types of cells. Now what are those 5 types? Sieve cells, sieve tubes, companion cells, phloem fibers, and phloem parenchyma. These are the 5 different types of cells which are present in the phloem. Okay. Now the sieve tubes, they are tubular cells who are having this perforated wall. क्या है ये sieve tube? आपको दिख रहा है? This is the sieve tube. It is having a tubular structure. It is having what? Tubular cells present है. And this tubular cells, they are going to be present with perforated walls. Okay. So phloem transports the food from leaves to other parts of the plant. Phloem क्या करेगा? वो food को transport करता है from leaves से other parts of the plant तक, and xylem transports the food from one part of the plant to other. So except the phloem fiber, all the other phloem cells are living cells. ठीक है, तो सारे के सारे phloem cells जो है, they are going to be living cells except what? Except the phloem fiber. ठीक है. Now next thing that we have to discuss is about the animal tissue. Now see, this is the location of the muscle fibers which have been given. So this is the stomach, and this is the smooth muscle fiber which is being present. Okay. Now see, animal tissues, I have already introduced you all with the animal tissue, that we have 4 different types of animal tissue. So we have first type of tissue is the epidermal epithelial tissue. Then we have connective tissue. After that we have muscular tissue, and lastly we have nervous tissue to discuss. Let's see if we can complete all the 4. Otherwise we will continue that in the next part, and we will discuss it with the exercise questions. Okay. So see, the first type of tissue that we have is the epithelial tissue. Now you are already aware of that epithelial tissue का function क्या होता है. Epithelial tissue is protective, right? Is a kind of protective tissue. So the covering or the protective tissue which is present in the animal body, that is called as the epithelial tissue. ठीक है, तो जो प्रोटेक्टिव टिश्यू या जो कवरिंग टिश्यू प्रेजेंट होता है एनिमल बॉडी के अंदर, which is protecting the tissues of the animal, or it is covering the animal body, then that type of tissue we call it as the epithelial tissue. Okay. Now this epithelium, it covers most organs and cavities within the body. अब हमारे body के अंदर बहुत सारे organs है. We have many organs and many cavities which are present within our body, right? So epithelium is the one who covers the more like most of the organs as well as cavities which are present in our body, because jitne bhi organs and cavities we are having inside our body, they need a covering, right? So it also forms a barrier to keep different body systems separate. Epithelium kya karta hai? Epithelium, it also act as a barrier itself. So because it is a barrier, what it is going to do, it is going to keep the different body systems separate. Now we have our circulatory system which is being operated in our body. We have respiratory system which is being operated, excretory system, and we have many different systems which has been operated inside our body, right? And all the body systems will be separated from each other. So for that, epithelium act as a barrier there. Okay. So the skin that we are having, the linings of the mouth, the linings of the blood vessels, lung alveoli, and kidney tubules, they are all made up of epithelial tissue. ठीक है. epithelial tissue से क्या क्या बनता है हमारे बॉडी में? the skin, हमारा जो skin है वो किससे बना है? It is made up of epithelial tissue. The inner lining of your mouth, what it is made up of? Epithelial tissue. आपके ब्लड वेसल्स का इनर लाइनिंग, दैट इज मेड अप ऑफ epithelial tissue. Our lung alveoli as well as the kidney tubule, this all are made up of epithelial tissue, and we all know that this epithelial tissue, it acts as a barrier and it keeps the different body systems in our body separate. Okay. So epithelium, it covers most organs as well as cavity within the body. Okay. So epithelial tissue cells, they are tightly packed and they form a continuous sheet. epithelial tissue cells क्या करते हैं? They are very much tightly packed, and here they form a continuous sheet together. So epithelial cells, they have only a small amount of cementing material which is present between them, and there are almost no intracellular spaces. ठीक है, epithelial tissue के पास क्या होता है, it has small amount of cementing material which is present between them, and वो सीमेंटिंग मटेरियल के बीच में यू विल सी दैट देर आर नो इंट्रासेल्युलर और इंटरसेल्युलर स्पेसेस विच आर प्रेजेंट. ओके, सो ऑब्वियसली एनीथिंग विच इज एंटरिंग और लिविंग द बॉडी, कोई भी चीज़ जब हमारे बॉडी में एंटर कर रही है और व्हेन इट इज लिविंग द बॉडी, it should cross at least one layer of epithelium. कितने layers? It should cross one layer of epithelium, then only it can enter our body and it can leave our body properly. Okay, so as a result, the permeability of the cell of various epithelia, so the permeability that we have with respect to the cell, with respect to different kinds of epithelia, that plays an important role in regulating the exchange of material between the body and the external environment, and also between the different parts of the body. ठीक है, सो जो हमारे सेल की परमेबिलिटी है with respect to various kind of epithelia, that plays a very important role. Now why it is playing a very important role and how? Because it is regulating the exchange, whatever kind of exchange is taking place between the material, between the body and the external environment. Whatever exchange of material is taking place, it is regulating that. And also whatever kind of, you can say, exchange of material is taking place between the different parts of the body, it is regulating that as well. Okay, so regardless of the type that is being present, all epithelium is usually separated of whatever type of whatever type they are of. Okay, जितने भी epithelium है वो उनके underlining tissue से separate होते हैं because of an extracellular fibrous basement membrane which is being present. ठीक है, whatever kind of epithelium is, or whatever kind of, whatever parts of the body it is, सारे के सारे एपिथेलियम एक दूसरे से सेपरेटेड होते हैं. कैसे? बिकॉज ऑफ द एक्स्ट्रा सेल्युलर फाइबरस बेसमेंट मेम्ब्रेन विच इज प्रेजेंट. Okay, so we have different epithelia which has been shown in figure 6.9. See, these are the different kinds of the epithelial tissues which are present. We have squamous epithelium tissue, we have stratified squamous epithelium tissue, then we have cuboidal epithelium tissue, and lastly we have this columnar epithelium tissue. So these are the four different types of epithelium tissue that we are having. Okay, so they are all these four different types of structures that we are having, they correlate with the unique functions and they perform the specific function in our body. For example, in cells lining the blood vessel or the lung alveoli, now we have our cells which are lining this blood vessel or the lung alveoli. वहाँ पे you will see that the transportation of the substances, it occurs through a selectively permeable membrane. That is, there is a simple flat kind of skin which has been present. Now selectively permeable surface means the plasma membrane or the cell membrane. So whatever kind of transportation that takes place in this lung alveoli or anywhere, it is always going to take place through the selectively permeable surface itself. Okay, so the simple squamous epithelial cell. Okay, the first type of epithelial cell is the simple squamous epithelial cell. They are extremely thin and flat. Now since they are thin and flat, they are going to form a delicate lining. What do they form? They form a delicate lining altogether. Okay, see, the esophagus and the lining of the mouth, they are also covered with the squamous epithelium. ये भी हमारा जो squamous epithelium है, it is covering what? It is covering the esophagus as well as the lining of a mouth. Okay, then the skin which protects the body, that is also made up of squamous epithelium only. So our skin is also made up of the squamous epithelium only, and the skin epithelial cells which are arranged in many layers, they are present there in many layers so that they can prevent the wear and tear of the tissue. ठीक है, तो हमारा जो स्किन एपिथेलियल सेल है वो अलग अलग लेयर्स में क्यों अरेंज्ड है? ताकि इट कैन प्रिवेंट द वेयर एंड टेयर. ओके, एंड सिंस दे आर अरेंज्ड इन अ पैटर्न ऑफ लेयर्स, द एपिथेलियम इज कॉल्ड एज अ स्ट्रैटिफाइड स्क्वामस एपिथेलियम. अब ये देखो, as this are arranged in a pattern of layers, different layers of epithelium, they are arranged together. We call such kind of arrangement as the stratified squamous epithelium. क्या बोलते हैं हम इसको? stratified squamous epithelium. Okay, so यहाँ पे stratified squamous epithelium में क्या होता है, where absorption and secretion occur as in the inner lining of the intestine, tall epithelial cells are present. तो हमारा जो intestine का inner lining है वहाँ पे क्या होता है, we know that intestine में absorption and secretion occurs in the intestine, right? So as in the inner lining of the intestine we have certain tall epithelial cells which are present, and this columnar means what? Pillar like. Okay, so this columnar epithelium, it is going to facilitate the movement across the epithelial barriers. Now we have different kinds of epithelial barriers which are present, and ये epithelial barrier के through movement facilitate कौन करवाता है? It has been done by the columnar epithelium, that is the pillar like epithelium. Okay, now this was with respect to intestine. Now we have a respiratory tract, right? So in the respiratory tract, the columnar epithelial tissue, it also has cilia. Columnar epithelium tissue पे क्या होता है? Cilia. Now cilia is a hair-like projection which is present on the outer surface of the epithelial cell. Cilia पे क्या होता है? There are hair-like projections which you are going to see, and ये hair like projection जो है that is present on the outer surface of the epithelial cell. Okay, now the cilia which is present on the outer surface of the epithelial cell, it is going to move, and their movement is going to push the mucus forward to clear it. Now whenever this cilia is going to show the movement, along with the movement it does one more thing, that it is going to push the mucus forward. वो mucus को आगे की तरफ forward करेगा, and it is going to clear that mucus altogether. Okay, so this type of epithelium we call it as ciliated columnar epithelium. Ciliated means it is having a hair-like projection and it is going to help in the movement of the mucus. Okay, so this type of epithelium we call it as ciliated columnar epithelium. Okay, then the next type that we have is cuboidal epithelium. Can you see the structure of this cuboidal epithelium? How does it look like? So it is a cube shaped cell. कैसा है ये? Cuboidal epithelium is a cube shaped cell, and that is why we call it as cuboidal epithelium. Now this cuboidal epithelium, it forms the lining of the kidney tubules and the duct of the salivary gland. क्या form करता है cuboidal epithelium? It forms the lining of the kidney tubule. Kidney tubule की जो lining है and जो salivary gland का duct है, it forms the this cuboidal epithelium is forming this kidney tubule as well as the duct of the salivary gland, where it provides the mechanical support. So cuboidal epithelium क्या कर रहा है? What is the function that it is performing? It is providing the mechanical support. Okay, so epithelial cells, they often acquire some additional specialization as the gland cells. ठीक है, तो हमारा जो epithelial cell है उसको और भी एडिशनल स्पेशलाइजेशंस की ज़रूरत होती है. लाइक दिस एपिथेलियल सेल, it also needs some gland cells along with it so that it can secrete substances at the epithelial surface. Now some of the substances should be secreted at the epithelial surface, right? So for that reason our epithelial cells, they need some additional specialization, and that additional specialization is the gland cells. Okay, so sometimes a portion of the epithelial tissue, it folds inward. तो आप कभी कभी देखोगे कि जो epithelial tissue है वो खुद को inward fold देता है, so that a multicellular gland is formed. Okay, so for forming this multicellular gland, this epithelial tissue का fold should be inward, and this is what we call it as glandular epithelium. So when the epithelial tissue is folding itself inwardly and it is making a multicellular gland, then we call that kind of gland as this columnar gland. Okay, so I hope that this four different types of epithelial tissue you are clear with. First is the squamous epithelium, जिससे हमारा skin बना हुआ है, हमारा lining of the mouth is also covered with this squamous epithelium only. Then the second type that we have is the stratified squamous epithelium, which is present in the inner lining of the intestine, and it is helping in absorption and secretion, right? Then we have this cuboidal epithelium. It's cuboidal, right? Because it is cube shaped, that is why it is called as cuboidal epithelium. Now it is present in the kidney, like it forms the lining of the kidney tubule, as well as it is present in the duct of the salivary gland, and it is providing a mechanical support there. And lastly we have this columnar cell, like columnar cells are lastly. So I hope you are clear with this four different types of epithelial tissues which we have discussed today, and you are clear with this complex permanent tissue as well. Now in the next class, we are going to start with this connective tissue. We will be discussing about the muscular tissue and the nervous tissue. And this three different types of tissues comes under the animal tissue that we are going to discuss on, as well as we will be discussing this different terms, which is like we will be discussing these questions as well, like define the term tissue. Then the second question is how many types of elements they together make up xylem tissue, and you have to name those elements. So we have xylem fiber, we have tracheids, right? We have 4 to 5 different elements who make up the xylem tissues. After that, next question is how are simple tissue different from the complex tissue in plants? Now we know that we have simple tissue as well as complex tissue which exists in plants, right? So how are they present? We are going to see that. After that we will be discussing on ki how to differentiate between the parenchyma, collenchyma and sclerenchyma on the basis of their cell wall के basis पे हम parenchyma, collenchyma and sclerenchyma को कैसे differentiate कर सकते हैं. After that we will be discussing on what are the functions of the stomata. क्या discuss करेंगे हम, stomata का function क्या है. Then we will be studying on, like diagrammatically we are going to see the difference that exists between the three different types of muscle fiber. Okay, we have three different types of muscle fiber that we are going to discuss that in the next class. Okay, so we will be discussing this. After that we are going to discuss on what is the specific function of the cardiac muscles. So ये भी हम next class में पढ़ेंगे when we complete with the muscular tissue, you can say. Okay, after that we will be discussing, like we will be studying on the differentiation between striated, unstriated and cardiac muscles on the basis of their structure and location in the body. Okay, then we will be drawing a well labeled diagram of neuron. We will be like naming the following things which have been given. Then we will be identifying the type of tissue which is present in the skin, in the bark of the tree, in the bone, then linings of the kidney tubule and the vascular bundle. After that, we will be naming the region in which the parenchyma tissue is present. Parenchyma tissue kahan pe present hai, we have to name that region. Then what is the role of epidermis in plants? Plants ke andar epidermis present hota hai, right? So what is the role of that epidermis, we will be discussing on. फिर we will be discussing on ki how does the cork it act as a protective tissue for the plant. Okay, and then we will be completing this chart of the permanent tissue. So I hope that whatever we have discussed till now in this lesson tissue is very much clear to you all. Now the rest of the part which has been left, we are going to cover that in the next class. Thank you everyone.